sounds like thunder from the ground. Did you know that freedom looks like a river flowing free and strong, like how we found each other? And yes, together we will work, try hard to make life better, the way that water carves through stones. But we can't do this alone. There's a struggle in those hills. You can feel its power still. The women take down private property in a peaceful act of the people's will. Sha-la-la-la-la-la-la, 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 sha-la-la-la-la-la-la. Can you see the boundless force? So strong it can't be moved from course. It's the sweetest form of gravity, the need for all things to be free. So don't you see that freedom looks like a river flowing free and strong, like how we found each other? And yes, together we will work, try hard to make life better, the way that water carves through stones. We can't do this alone. No, we can't do this alone. We will come together, we will build together, we will fight together to be free. To be free. Until we win this revolution. Until we win this revolution. Until we win this revolution. And we will win this revolution. And we will win this revolution. And we will win revolution.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sam. I'll be one of your MCs tonight. Thank you for joining us. My co-MC Melika is here. Melika, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Melika from GAB Los Angeles. So excited for you all to be here for Abante, Babae, continue the fight for democracy. We will be starting shortly after this video.
Cool. I think we're going to jump straight into it. So again, my name is Sam. I'm with Gabriela Oakland. For some online protocol, please rename yourself with your name, region, and organization if applicable, if you do feel like sharing. English closed captioning is available if you look towards the bottom of your screen, and there should be an option under CC live transcript. Also, please keep your mics muted and use the chat function to react and ask questions. We will be taking questions during the meeting, especially for one of our first speaker joining us from the Philippines. So we encourage you to share your curiosity and share your questions with us all. And then I'll go ahead to Melika.
Yes, if we could get the next slide. So just a little bit about our organization, Gabriela. Gabriela is a grassroots alliance of more than 200 organizations based in the Philippines, as well as several countries around the world, waging a struggle for the liberation of all oppressed Filipino women. Defend Filipino, defend Filipino women, defend Gabriela is a campaign for the basic human rights of women, which includes the right to demand a democracy free of corruption. Filipino women who take a stance are commonly targets of terror tagging and violence at the hands of dictators such as Duterte and Marcos, who use violence against women as a tool to maintain their power.
We can go to the next slide. So as I'm sure people have heard, just yesterday, the Philippine Congress proclaimed victory for Bongbong Marcos and Sara Duterte. Their path to victory, rife with corruption, voter disenfranchisement, and violence perpetrated by their rotten predecessor fathers and their US military sponsored forces. Gabriela USA vehemently rejects the return of the Marcos Duterte regimes. As members of the Filipina militant women's movement, we understand the gender violence inherent in the election of the heirs of dictators. Many of us in the diaspora are keenly aware of how Marcos's labor export policy led to massive exploitation, wage theft, and separation of families, separation of mothers from their children, meanwhile raking in billions of pesos generated by the people and hoarded by the Marcos family. And Duterte has always made clear his hatred of women through his misogynistic remarks, rape jokes. With the election of his daughter as VP, who says she will continue the reforms of her father, the message is clear that this incoming administration will not hold the macho fascist accountable to his crimes against humanity. Not to mention the thousands killed under martial law, the drug war, and collateral lives lost in each regime's cling to power. We are here today in condemnation of the return of these names to power, but our fight does not stop at Marcos or at Duterte. Our fight carries on until our people see just and lasting peace. We thank everyone for being here at our online action, Abante, Babae, continue the fight for democracy. We come together to raise the call to reject the Marcos and Duterte tandem and lift up the people's demands through the Gabriela Women's Agenda. It is more important to us to strengthen our organizing work together as we continue to build the movement in the US through our agitation, organization, and mobilizing through Gabriela USA. So again, thank you so much for being here. For our first speaker, I'm very excited to introduce Jom Salvador, Secretary General and International Spokesperson of Gabriela Philippines. Joms will be highlighting the current situation and the impacts of the elections on Filipino people. And I also encourage, as I mentioned before, we'll be taking questions for Joms directly after her speech. So feel free to drop your questions into the chat. And Joms, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Sam, and good morning, everyone. It's really good morning from the Philippines and good day to the rest of us. And it's really a source of joy, if I may say, amidst this very seemingly dark and trying times to be with my fellow Gabrielas from across the globe. And knowing that while we brace for the impact of the next administration on the lives of the peoples of the Philippines, the lives of women in the Philippines, that we continue to be, as I hear, on a fighting stance, ready to tackle the challenges ahead. And I think that is a really very important mindset and attitude for every one of us, for every Filipino who will be really faced with a very huge challenge of the next presidency. As everyone have been saying or observing about the recent elections, national elections in the Philippines. Of course, it signaled the return of the tyrannical Marcoses in the highest seat of power. It's the return of the Marcoses to Malacanang. But at the same time, it extends the equally tyrannical rule of the Dutertes, which an administration that we have seen for the past 6 years that has been ridden with grave issues of human rights violations, corruption, um, bad response to the pandemic, and of course, the ever worsening situation of poverty, landlessness, joblessness, and hunger among Filipinos. But at the same time, I think what this current or recent elections also so clearly showed us are the symptomatic ills or the chronically ill electoral system in the country, in the Philippines. A system which is ridden with, of course, rampant vote buying, massive disinformation as a form of cheating, political repression and tagging, voter disenfranchisement, of course, a non-transparent, private and foreign-owned automated voting system where cheating is really built in. So it really makes it difficult for many of us to see where the cheating happened, but nevertheless cannot hide the fact that cheating was rampant, and hence the people's democratic voice through our vote has been robbed from us, from the people. And of course, we have an electoral commission as a final, perhaps, nail on the coffin, an electoral commission which was fully appointed by the outgoing Duterte administration, orchestrating this kind of election, which has left all of us at one point baffled by how well executed the cheating was, but at the same time doing everything to ensure that the Marcoses are able to return to power, the Dutertes are able to extend their rule, and that the Filipino people will be put in a position where much of our rights this early are already being violated by not only the outgoing administration but the presumptive administration of Bongbong Marcos. But of course, despite this, and if I may say, if I may add also, in spite of foreign powers like the US easily supporting the new administration that will be, of course, installed unfortunately, upon the revision of the Filipino people's history of fighting against the Marcoses, grave human rights violations, the plunder of public coffers, and sellout of our national patrimony and sovereignty to foreign powers, many Filipinos, freedom-loving Filipinos, continue to fight for the rights and interests of the Filipino people against what seemingly unsurmountable odds, but in full recognition of the fact that at the end of the day, it is the people, or power, real power lies on the people, lies on our unity, lies on our resolve to fight for our democratic rights, to fight for good governance, to fight for a future for every one of us, where no Filipino will be denied of our rights and violated by the administration. So I would like to go straight to what we can see or what we can glean as our most urgent tasks in the face of all this current situation we are in. And I would like to perhaps highlight four urgent tasks or urgent aspects of the people's struggle as we face head on the incoming administration. Of course, first among our struggles will definitely be our struggle against the Marcos Duterte administration, because it is, or it will be, an administration that will be installed to power based on cheating, based on massive disinformation, based on vote buying and all the irregularities of the recent elections. And of course, knowing fully that the Marcos Duterte tandem will be the crystallization, so to speak, of fascism, corruption, imperialist puppetry, and attacks on the economic, political, and social rights of the people. That it will be an administration that should be met by the people, the people's movement head on, as we challenge, as we defy this kind of administration that we know will make the situation of majority of the Filipino worse for the coming years. We are still in a situation of much in a situation of a general economic crisis, and of course, the pandemic is still raging on, and many of the impacts of the Duterte administration's policies in its attempt to further enhance the neoliberal agenda in the Philippines will be, of course, will be continued by the next administration. For example, the Philippines is now facing our highest debt, public debt, and already this early, there have been pronouncements that the Filipino people should brace for higher taxes, for still many economic restructuring policies that will ensure that we will be able to pay back our loans from many foreign powers, our loans from private institutions, which were made during the pandemic and were, of course, what padded the pockets of the current the Duterte administration and his ilk. The second struggle that we should pursue, apart from exposing and fighting what the next administration would definitely be continuing on the economic and the political and social aspect. The second struggle that we will be facing is to hold the Duterte administration accountable for many of its crimes against the people, for all the extrajudicial killings, under the drug war, under the war against insurgency. We should hold the Duterte administration or Duterte himself accountable for many of his crimes against the Filipino people, including the fact that he plunged the Filipino people in the worst economic situation, in the worst economic crisis the Philippines has ever known since its post-colonial era. And I would like to mention that in this particular aspect, it is really important to gather the broadest support for holding the Duterte government or the President Duterte accountable to many of his crimes. Through the years, we have had the triumph, if I may say. The Filipino People's Movement has had the triumph to expose Duterte's crimes against the people and to enjoin wide support from across the world to the Filipino people's struggle. And now that we will be bracing for the next administration, we must definitely continue our struggle to hold Duterte accountable for his crimes, because his actions, his administrations, the policies of his administrations are the policies on which the next Marcos administration will be building itself upon. And so there is a close relationship between our struggle against the incoming Marcos administration with our struggle against, or to hold Duterte accountable for all his crimes against the Filipino people. A third struggle that we should be forwarding and should be pursuing is, of course, the struggle for democratic reforms. As I mentioned, we are in the worst economic crisis. We are in a situation where human rights violations is rampant, where corruption is all the more present in the system. And so long as these conditions exist, it will always have the effect of plunging the situation of the Filipino people, especially the majority of the Filipino people, the majority of the oppressed and exploited Filipino people, the working class Filipino people. It will make the situation for many of us worse. And so fighting the Marcos administration by challenging it to respond to the democratic calls, or for the protection and for the promotion of the democratic rights of farmers, of workers, of urban poor people, of migrant Filipinos, and the rest of the marginalized Filipino people will be at the core of this struggle, the people's struggle towards the incoming administration, and our struggle for accountability of the Duterte administration. Our struggle for democratic reforms, which actually means a struggle to reverse all the advances of the neoliberal agenda, which Duterte made sure that he implemented: privatization of the public sector, further plunder of Philippine patrimony, the sellout of our sovereignty to both China and the US, will all be connected as we push for the assertion of the people's and the Filipino women's democratic rights. This struggle, the people's struggle for democratic reforms, will be upon which our anti-fascist and our anti-imperialist struggle will be upon. And so it is very important to continue, for example, our campaigns for land rights, for jobs, our campaigns and our struggle for women's rights, our campaigns and struggles for a government that is truly responsive to the people's needs, and a government that will respect people's rights and promote people's welfare. The fourth struggle that we should ever pursue is something that would definitely hit closest to home, and it is the struggle against fascist attacks versus the people's movements, and of course against movements and organizations like GABRIELA, which has been fighting at the forefront and leading people's struggles, leading women's struggles for our democratic rights. The fascist machinery of the Duterte administration, enhanced by the equally fascist, what we see will be an equally, if not more fascist, Marcos Duterte administration, will definitely be used to quell people's resistance to many of the policies and advances on the neoliberal front of the incoming administration. And it will be our challenge, and our political task will be to continue to educate, organize, and mobilize women and peoples so that we create the broadest possible unity of the Filipino people to struggle for our democratic rights, to struggle for truth, to struggle for accountability against corruption, against fascism, for good governance. And by doing so, that we strengthen, it is important, it is very imperative that we strengthen and expand our organization, our influence, so that we are able to defend not only ourselves, but defend the Filipino people's, the Filipino women's right to assert our rights and to assert our dignity as a people, because definitely we will be facing fascism as the incoming administration does everything it could to continue entrenching itself in power, despite the fact that it did so, or that it will be able to do so against the democratic aspirations of the people, against the exercise of the people's right to select and to fight for and to install a government that will respond to the many urgent needs of the Filipino people, especially in the situation of grave human rights violations and an ever worsening economic crisis that continues to oppress, that continues to allow for the oppression and exploitation of the Filipino people, especially women who have always been disproportionately impacted by many of the policies, by many of the crises that we all face, and especially women who in the assertion of our rights, of our democratic rights, are met with the worst forms of human rights violations and indignities created and pursued by those in power. So to end, I would just like to reiterate that we have just started. We have bigger challenges ahead, and it will be difficult challenges, but as we have seen, as the Filipino people have seen and have shown during the time of our struggle against the first Marcos dictatorship, against in our struggle for our rights and freedoms in over the past decades, and recently under the Duterte administration, that The people will persist because it is our right to persist. The people will persist in struggle because power truly and fully emanates from the people, and that people united will never be defeated. Magandang umaga mula sa Pilipinas, magandang araw, good day, makibaka, huwag matakot. Maraming salamat. Thank you.
Salamat, Joms. Hindi pa tapos ang laban. Yeah, we are a little over time, so if we have time at the end of our program, we can conduct our Q&A then. But really, just to highlight that to advance the campaign work of Gabriela Philippines, to really advance the struggle to hold Duterte accountable for his war crimes against the people, to advance the struggle for democratic reforms, and to continue our campaign work for women's rights, land rights, and advance the struggle against fascist attacks. We are raising funds tonight for Gabriela Philippines. So if you are able to donate, please Venmo any amount that you can to Gabriela USA. We really invite others to donate. These funds will go directly to GAB chapters in the Philippines to sustain their work and to support these most crucial organizing efforts. So again, maraming salamat, Joms. And we are ready to introduce our next speaker. We have Josefina Huico. Josefina Huico is a beloved mother and grandmother who wants to see a free and democratic Philippines in her lifetime. As a martial law survivor, overseas Filipino worker, and a child of a guerrilla nurse, Lola Josie intimately experiences the issues that plague Filipinos and understands the importance to resist injustice. She immigrated to Seattle in 1996 and looks forward to returning home one day. But in the meantime, you can find her taking care of her patients, spending time with her family, and marching in the street with her granddaughter and loved ones. Josefina campaigned tirelessly in the most recent election for Leni Robredo and survived martial law under dictator Ferdinand Marcos. She will be speaking to us today about her experiences under the dictatorship of Marcos Sr. and why Filipino women must fight back against Marcos Jr.
Hi, Lola.
Hello, good evening to everyone. Good morning sa Pilipinas. I am Josefina Huico, and I really have the time to attend to rallies because I don't want the same people leading our land, our country. Inaapi tayo, hindi magsasalita. But we have to talk and voice out our opinion about the leaders that plundered all the wealth, especially the Marcoses during my time. I have gone through a lot. I was telling Francesca about us lining up to get the basic food during the time after martial law. Most businesses were hoarding everything that you can buy, like rice, sugar, milk. And we have to line up. What about the people that do not have any money? So instead of just being quiet about everything, I joined the movement in Marikina City. At the time, it's only Marikina, Rizal, through the Church of Twinville and Fairlane subdivision. And we thought by prayers we can hold on to fight martial law. At the time, Pimentel was living in that area, and so we were struggling. We were asking each other, how can we mobilize? How can we help other people to voice out? So we went to EDSA and we kept on praying, and at the time, Archbishop called us to just gather all together in EDSA, and I firmly believe that was the right thing to do. Even with 3 children, age 3, 4, 5, I have to leave them. I said, I have to do something. I was not afraid. And martial law at the time was letting, oh, by the way, during the martial law, the military people, when we were in the 70s, 72, we were in Arias Street in San Miguel, Manila, which is about 3 blocks away from Malacanang. I have 3 brothers who were activists too, and they were throwing stones in Mendiola. I didn't join that because they protect me. We will just go, something like that. And so during the time of martial law, the framed up or the orchestrated attack in Malacanang, I knew it was not for real, but to show the evidence that military rule should prevail at the time. So there was a time when the apartments were being searched, and my 2 brothers have this red book. Apparently, my friend and house help was holding the book in between the legs, and she's a lady who's strong enough to keep it, that they won't be bothered. Otherwise, my 2 brothers will be taken away. And then the message to the youth for today is never give up. You have all the right. We have done our part. You have to continue the struggle. You have to love your country. Be brave. Makibaka, wag matakot. It's for the country and for the people that you love. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tita Josie. Okay. Yes, thank you so much for being here, so much for inspiring us, for inspiring your granddaughter and your family, and being willing to share your experiences. I can't imagine that it's easy, but I know that it's more important that we continue to hear from people like you, hear from people who have survived these injustices, so that we may always remember who we are fighting for. So, yeah, okay. Thank you again, and hope you're all doing well in the audience. We'll move on to our next sharing, which is going to be Joy Barrios. So Joy Barrios LeBlanc serves as a senior lecturer at UC Berkeley after working as an associate professor at the University of the Philippines. She is the author of several books. Among them, To Be a Woman is to Live at a Time of War, and From the Theater Wings, Grounding and Flight of Filipino Women Playwrights. She has won national literary awards and was among the 100 women weavers of history chosen for the Philippine Centennial 1998. She received the 10 Outstanding Women in the Nation's Service Award in 2004 and the Balagtas Lifetime Achievement Award for Filipino Poetry 2016. And this year, the Danggal ng Panitikan Award from the Philippine National Language Commission. Thank you so much, Joy Barrios, for being here. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Hi, everyone. I forgot to put in my CV that I was actually a founding member of GABRIELA, I think in 1984. Of course, I was member number 455 or some unknown anonymous member at that time, but very, very proud to have been a founding member and very proud to be with you young GABRIELA members today. I am reading the poem Balota, which I wrote in Filipino, but I will be reading with the original Filipino, the English translation by Karen Liagas. Balota. Nanalig tayo sa balota at sa kapangyarihan ng boto at pag-asa. Paano nasusukat ang pagkabigo? May nagsisiklab sa galit, may nalulunod sa hinagpis. We believed in the ballot, in the power to vote, in hope. How can we contain our despair, the rage that engulfs us, the sorrow that drowns us? Kasama, batid nating nananatili tayo sa pagtindig. Hindi natin iyuyuko ang ulo pagkat walang dapat ikahiya sa hangaring dakila. Hindi tayo luluhod sa kahit sinong maghahari-harian o reyna-reynahan. Hindi kailanman magtitiklop ng tuhod. Comrades, we stand steadfast in our fight. Let us not bow our heads down because there is no shame in heroic ambitions. We will not kneel before anyone who play at being kings and queens. Don't let ourselves curl into balls to weep. Iniisip kong sa maraming dekada ay may natutunan sa pakikibaka. Kay raming larangan ng labanan mula lansangan hanggang kabundukan. Through the decades, there's much to learn from our common struggle. How we carry our battles into many spheres, from the mountains to the streets. Our dream does not end in the ballot. Our hearts beat still, our breaths persevere. Though we've been shoved back, our steps forced to retreat, together with the masses who have risen, who are rising up, awakening to the roots of our suffering, we will march on. We will not surrender our future, a country shaped by justice for all. May the failed ballot be our cry to rally. We will never fail in our solidarity. Hindi nagtatapos ang layon sa balota. Patuloy tayong titibok, hihinga, saglit mang matigilan at mapanilay, saglit mang mapaurong ang mga paa, kung kabalikat ang masa. Namulat at mamumulat pa sa ugat ng pagkadusta ay susulong at hahakbang. Hindi natin isusuko ang hangad para sa lipunang makatarungan sa lahat. Ang nabigong balota ay gawing panata. Hindi tayo titigil sa pakikibaka. Mabuhay po ang Gabriela.
Wow. Thank you so much, Tita Joy, for that agitating cultural offering. We must be steadfast. We must not be afraid. The struggle is in our hearts of the people from generation to generation, and we will continue to march on. Let us feel the fire in our hearts today. Makibaka, huwag matakot. So moving on to the next speaker on our program, it's really important for us to continue this work post-elections, to continue the fight and organize. Next, we have Terry Servas, Secretary General of GABRIELA USA, who will touch on why Filipino women across the US must continue to unite and fight against the Marcos Duterte regime.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Melika, and thank you to everyone who's joined our online action today. We in GABRIELA USA reject the Marcos and Duterte tandem. just yesterday, the Philippine Congress proclaimed Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. and Sara Duterte Carpio as the winners of the presidential and vice presidential elections. And as women, we really need to come together and fight the Marcos and Duterte regime. We can expect that under Marcos and Duterte, Filipino women and our families will continue to suffer worsening poverty and human rights violations. And we as Filipino women here in the US, we remember the bleak years of martial law that gave rise to a powerful people's movement. The Filipino people, including women and children, refused to kneel to Marcos's tyranny. And building strength from the resistance of Filipino women against Marcos's corruption and tyranny, GABRIELA, a National Women's Alliance, was founded in 1985 at the height of the people's opposition to martial law. And today, GABRIELA, which has expanded globally wherever Filipino women can be found, still answers the call for change and justice for the Filipino people. So that's why we as GABRIELA have joined with over 180 other organizations and individuals across North America in signing a manifesto on the recently conducted Philippine elections. In our manifesto, we declared our unity in rejecting and fighting the Marcos-Duterte tandem. We believe that their victory in the recently conducted elections is based on lies, disinformation, and fraud. And we reject Marcos and Duterte because they will only perpetuate their families' political dynasties who have plundered the wealth of the Philippines and committed grave human rights violations against the Filipino people. GAB USA, along with other signatories of the manifesto, uphold the values of transparency, honesty, freedom, and democracy for our kababayan in the Philippines. And we really know that many in our communities are grieving or are outraged over the return of the Marcoses and Dutertes in power, but we must not lose hope. We will not lose hope, nor will we stop organizing. Our GABRIELA organizations will continue to go back to our communities to fight alongside our kababayan against any policies of Marcos and Duterte that will perpetuate poverty and corruption. That is also why we as GABRIELA, along with other organizations across the United States, are forming a US-wide coalition. So in this coalition, we've united around several points. The first one being that we reject Marcos Duterte for the reasons outlined in the manifesto. And we also hold accountable the Marcos and Duterte families for their crimes against the people, which are several, including a $35 million contempt order issued against Ferdinand Marcos Jr. by the US District Court, District of Hawaii, in connection with a human rights class suit against Ferdinand Marcos Sr., as well as over 100 people who were abducted, imprisoned, tortured, and killed under Ferdinand Marcos Sr.'s martial law. And the Marcos family also has graft and corruption charges against them that were unduly junked by the Sandigan Bayan. And the Marcos family also has to pay estate taxes that are amounting to $204 billion, which was accounted by the Philippine Bureau of Internal Revenue. Lastly, in terms of some of the other crimes that Marcos and Duterte families that we would like them to be held accountable for is the crimes against humanity, which under the Rodrigo Duterte administration, which is being investigated right now by the International Criminal Court. We have two more demands as a US-wide coalition, which are to demand the Marcos family to immediately return the 10 billion US dollars in ill-gotten wealth to the Filipino people, including interest, and then to demand an independent and thorough investigation into the conduct of the 2022 Philippine elections. Because there were so many irregularities, and we want to make sure that we hold accountable the Commission on Elections and all other government agencies and responsible parties. So, you know, we as GABRIELA USA, we really see that we as Filipino women overseas and all our friends and allies here in the US, we have a role to play to reject the Marcos Duterte tandem. It's up to us to carry the torch of women who founded GABRIELA, like Ate Joy Barrios, like Lola Josie, like Jones, who are continuing the fight, and all the other brave activists who fought during the Marcos dictatorship decades ago. So we have to continue the fight that they've started. History has shown us time and time again how the Filipino people have valiantly resisted colonization, occupation, and dictatorship throughout the centuries. So we call on you to join us in this online action by signing the manifesto, joining the US-wide coalition to fight for democracy in the Philippines, and also joining a Gabriela mass organization near you. We've defeated dictators in the past and we can do it again. Maki baka wag matakot. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Terry. Yes, we'll be dropping links also, and look out for any follow-up information with the manifesto and more information about the coalition that Terry had spoken about. It's really important that we build a broad coalition of both solidarity allies and of course of our kababayan here in the Philippines to oppose this rotten and this corrupt administration. So with that, I will pass it on to our next speaker, who is Maria Magatbag, Vice President of PNI. Today, Maria will speak on why young Filipino women must combat historical revisionism and mobilize the younger generation to reject Marcos Duterte. Thank you for being here, Maria.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maria, and I just want to say thank you for giving me the space to speak with you today. As overseas Filipino youth rejecting the Marcos Duterte victory, we would typically get this question of why should we even care? We don't live there and it doesn't affect us. And my answer to that is I still care about how it affects people back home. The election results may not have a direct impact on me, but it does on my family members who still live there. My grandparents, my aunts and uncles, cousins, and family friends. It also impacts the poor working class, women, indigenous communities, and other underprivileged groups in the Philippines. I know that I may not be impacted as much nor strongly related to the people it affects, but I still reject the tandem for the love and care for our people. Both Duterte and Marcos, the Marcos family, have done numerous unforgivable actions to the Filipino people, such as killing thousands of lives and plundering the country into debt. People have starved because they have struggled to find food every day, have struggled to find jobs due to economic mismanagement, and have been silent, labeled as insurgents just for expressing discontent. All of this while Duterte and Marcos live lavishly, and we've had enough. And it's not fair that they have been working hard to spread propaganda and give the masses false information about their accomplishments. It is sickening to see Bongbong Marcos portray his father's dictatorship as some kind of golden age when they literally introduced martial law, killed thousands of people, stole more than $10 billion from the people, and were exiled from the country in 1986. Even more, it's disheartening to see our people believe in their lies. But we can't exactly blame them, can we? Because that's a type of information they've been fed with. But we can't let Marcos or Duterte feed us lies either. That's why it's important for us as Filipino overseas youth to reject the Marcos Duterte tandem and to remember the truth. And as much as I hate to say it, but being here in the United States, we definitely have more resources to learn more about the Marcos regime in the 70s, 80s, the people power. I myself started learning about the history during college. But in the Philippines, it isn't like that. People don't have those resources that we do. It's not taught in the education system, and people just have this general idea that the martial law was a great time due to social media propaganda, especially on Facebook. So we must ask ourselves, how can we help educate our people about the truth of Duterte and Marcos's wrongdoings? How can we protect our people from the lies and false propaganda they spread? I know it's a very difficult question to answer right now, but I do believe that it's a step towards change because people should know the truth, because we should never let martial law happen again, and because education is power. Thank you.
Salamat, Maria. Just like Maria said, we must combat against the historical revisionism that spreads in the Philippines like a plague, erasing the history of the people's struggle. We must be vocal about the rejection of the Marcos Duterte regime. Abante, Babae! So to move on to our next speaker, as we're coming to a close, we want to recognize the strength and solidarity with organizations and allies from all over the world. Our fight against the Marcos Duterte regime necessitates allies in the struggle. To provide a solidarity message, Aisha Mansour from Palestinian will offer words of solidarity. Aisha Mansour is a co-founder of Palestinian in Seattle, Washington, and grassroots organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement and Palestinian Feminist Collective. She is an anti-imperialist and anti-capitalist feminist who is committed to fighting for the Palestinian liberation in the diaspora and in the homeland. She is currently a graduate student in ethnic studies at San Francisco State University, where she studies the impact of imperial feminisms on third world women through military violence, occupation, and colonialism. Welcome, Aisha.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Aisha, and I'm here bringing militant solidarity from Palestinian women across the globe as we fight against the Marcos Duterte regime. We in Palestiniat cannot emphasize the importance of revolutionary women in the struggle against colonialism and imperialism enough. I have spent most of my life studying the impacts of imperial feminism on Palestinian women because it is abundantly clear that imperial feminism at best will exclude Palestinian women and at worst will be used to justify our murder and the theft of our homeland. And I know that this is true for all third world women. Much of the language that we use to describe our fight against the Israeli colonial entity has been informed and influenced by Gabriela. You are our closest joint struggle partners, and I say joint struggle because that is how we see this fight against imperialism and colonialism, one that is inextricably linked to the liberation of the Philippines. So we don't say solidarity because that assumes that we can extend and retract our solidarity when we see fit. We say joint struggle because we are committing to your liberation like we have committed to our liberation, because we understand that no one is free until we are all free. I have not met a Palestinian that believes that this recent election in the Philippines was ever fair to begin with, from the red tagging to the disinformation campaigns to the attacks and harassment from state forces against the progressive movement, against women specifically in the progressive movement. It is much too familiar to us as Palestinians. In Palestine, we do not face a neo-colonial ruler, but a settler colonial entity. It is an occupying force backed by the wealthiest nation in existence, the United States of America. And within the settler colonial entity of Israel, there is an extension of the Zionist state that masquerades as a sovereign government for the Palestinian people, and this is known as the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority is by no means representative of the Palestinian people or our interests. The Palestinian Authority is an institutional puppet of the Zionist regime, and it works in security coordination with the occupation, with the Israeli occupation forces, to aid and abet the murder and suppression of Palestinians who resist the occupation. So in short, we have not had a fair election in occupied Palestine in over 100 years. So as Marcos's son takes power after this fraudulent election, we can't help but see the similarities in tactics that both of our oppressors use to repress our people's struggle. There is no fair election in Palestine, and there is no fair election in the Philippines as long as imperial and colonial forces control our economic structures and murder our resistance fighters. And I'm just really honored to be in joint struggle with you all. I'm really honored to speak on this panel. And I want to say thank you again for allowing me to be here with you and highlight Filipino-Palestinian solidarity, because we are in this fight with you until the end of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aisha, for being here. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And from Palestine to the Philippines, stop the US war machine. As we know how interconnected our struggles are, we continue to be in solidarity with one another, fighting for the liberation of all of our peoples. So on to, I want to make sure that folks are ready for a picture that will come later on as we are closing this program out. But as to raise our calls of action that were mentioned before, some of our calls to action are to sign on to the Manifesto of Filipinos in North America on the recently conducted Philippine elections. This tiny URL is there available for your easy access, as well as encouraging you to join the coalition of Filipino organizations across the US rejecting Marcos and Duterte. If you're not already part of a mass organization, we welcome you to Gabriela. There are chapters almost everywhere, that every major city that you can find, and we hope to see you soon out in the streets or out in community, building with each other on the streets. I said on the streets already, but I'm just really pumped up. Thank you again so much for being here. We will have a couple more calls to action, and please stay on as we will take a joint group picture at the end. Okay.
Okay, some more calls to action. Join a local Gabriela chapter. Contact Gabriela USA at gabrielawomen@gmail.com to learn more. Support us to continue our Defend Women, Defend Gabriela campaign, both in the US and in the Philippines, by making a donation at our Venmo at Gabriela USA. And then last but not least, create videos to say why you fight for the rights of women, and support Gabriela. Post your videos online and tag Gabriela USA on Facebook and Instagram with the hashtags Defend Filipino Women and Defend Gabriela. So that concludes our program for today. Thank you everyone for joining us. Such an agitating speakers. And yeah, please stick around. Let's take a group photo. Can someone take the group photo? I don't know how to do that.
We'll start. Hey, Fran, would you mind stopping the screen share, and then we can put it on gallery view? Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you again so much for joining. Please note the calls to action, and we'll see you next time. Okay, there are a couple of sheets of participants. I'll start with the first one. Okay. Fist up. I can't do both. Okay, fist up. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Okay, next page. All right, one more time. Keep your fists up. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Have a good evening, morning, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us from the Philippines, drums. From anyone on the East Coast, thank you for staying up late. Have a good night. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Ingat.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
Happy birthday, Aisha.
Ingat.
Oh, happy birthday, Aisha.
Happy birthday, Aisha.
Happy birthday to you.
Lola.